Benjamin O. Davis, Jr. was born on December 18, 1912, in Washington, D.C. He was a bright student, and as a teenager he wanted to be an aviator. In 1932, he was accepted into West Point Military Academy. This was at a time when racial segregation existed. Black citizens and white citizens had to eat in separate restaurants, sit on separate benches, attend separate movie theaters, and drink from different water fountains. Even in the military, black troops and white troops were kept apart. Benjamin O. Davis, Jr. was the first African-American student to graduate from West Point in the 20th century. His time there was not easy. From 1932 to 1936, his fellow cadets shunned him because of his race. They refused to speak to him except in the line of duty, a tradition known as silencing. Talking about his time at West Point, Davis said, "What they didn't realize was that I was stubborn enough to put up with the treatment to reach the goal I had come to obtain." He graduated in the top one-third of the class in 1936, 35th out of 276, and his strength of character, which enabled him to make it through West Point, would be needed in the early days of his military career. As leader of the Tuskegee Airmen in World War II, Benjamin O. Davis, Jr. became the catalyst for desegregation of the armed forces. After graduating, he had been turned down for flight training because the segregated Army Air Force accepted no blacks. The rationale for preventing black men from becoming pilots was based on the official U.S. government document, employment of Negro manpower in war. These myths were a part of the struggle Davis faced as a black man in the military. It was only when President Franklin D. Roosevelt was running for re-election established an experimental all-black flying squadron to train black pilots that Davis would change the course of U.S. military history forever. In March 1942, Benjamin O. Davis, Jr. and 4 other black flyers graduated from the first black flying class at Tuskegee, Alabama. 6 months after earning his wings, Davis was named the commander of the 99th Fighter Squadron, known as the Tuskegee Airmen. After completing their combat training, no commander in a combat zone would accept the unit, but eventually, under pressure from Army General George C. Marshall, they were sent to North Africa in April 1943. Davis and his men knew that it was racial prejudice which was preventing them from joining the war, but Davis knew that protest was futile. Davis later said that his greatest accomplishment was keeping the men of the 99th flying and fighting to prove they were the equal of whites, instead of wasting energy and endangering their future by protesting racial discrimination. After 90 days in combat, a negative report of the performance of the 99th was sent up to the chain of command to the military leaders. The report stated that the 99th was not aggressive, did not have the will to reach an objective, and did not have the needed stamina, and could not fight as a team. The report recommended that the black flyers be removed from the combat missions. Davis was furious when he heard the report. Most of the criticisms referred to the squadron's first few days in combat, and he felt that this was yet another example of racism. Benjamin O. Davis, Jr. testified before the McCloy Advisory Committee on Negro troop policies. He stood up for his men, stating that early mistakes were the result of inexperience, but the report had neglected to mention that these mistakes were quickly corrected. As for the question of stamina, he pointed out that the 99th had not received any replacement pilots in 2 months, and the pilots had been flying up to 6 missions each day, more than any of the white pilots. As a result of Benjamin O. Davis's convincing testimony, the 99th was allowed to continue flying. This was perhaps Davis's most important action. He had prevented the black flying program from being discontinued. This gave him and his men the opportunity to prove that black pilots were just as capable as white pilots. Davis went on to command the 332nd Fighter Group, and this squadron of the Tuskegee Airmen was assigned to bomber escort missions in Italy. Often, American bombers were lost because their fighter escorts, which were sent to protect them, took off to chase enemy planes in search of personal glory. Davis knew that this was an excellent opportunity for the Tuskegee Airmen to undermine the racist War College report by proving that black pilots could get the job done. Davis warned his men that there would be stiff punishment if anyone abandoned the bombers. His leadership in the situation was critical to the success of the Tuskegee Airmen and ultimately to the desegregation of the military. What did you think was Benjamin O. Davis's most important legacy?
Important legacy?
Mm-hmm.
I know the mantra of our squadron was stay focused, stick to it, get it done. That was his legacy. You know, no excuses. See, no excuses. Get the job done. Stay focused. I don't care what's going on around you. Stay focused. If you're assigned to get that plane, or whatever your mission was. See, I think that was the legacy that he passed on to others.
The combat record showed how skillful the Tuskegee Airmen were at defeating the enemy. In over 15,000 combat missions, 260 German planes were destroyed and not a single U.S. bomber was lost while being escorted by the Tuskegee Airmen. Benjamin O. Davis and the Tuskegee Airmen had proved that black men could skillfully fly airplanes.
We stayed with the bombers. As a result, we never lost one bomber that we were escorting to enemy fighters. We're the only fighter group in history that never lost a bomber we were escorting to enemy fighters. That's something we are proud of, made possible because of the P-51, our Tuskegee training, and Colonel Ben Davis.
In 1948, as a direct result of Davis's leadership and actions, President Harry Truman signed Executive Order 9981, which desegregated the armed forces. Air Force historian Dr. Alan L. Grothman said of Davis, "None of his many achievements holds for him the satisfaction of moving the U.S. Air Force to racial integration. For that pioneering accomplishment, America stands in his debt." Change and desegregation in the American society in general came more slowly. However, Davis's legacy was that he was the catalyst for change to take place in the country as a whole. In 1998, Benjamin O. Davis Jr. was awarded the rank of 4-star general. At the ceremony, Secretary of Defense William Cohen said, "Few did more than General Davis to prove that black and white Americans could not only serve together, but that they could succeed together." President Clinton said, "General Davis, you are the very embodiment of the principle that from diversity we can build an even stronger unity. If we follow your example, we will be able to fulfill the promise of our founders to be a nation of equal rights and dignity for all." General Davis's actions, leadership, and commitment to excellence had a monumental effect on history, as desegregation of the armed forces laid the foundation for equal rights for African Americans. The historic election of Barack Obama as the 44th President of the United States is evidence of General Davis's significant impact on U.S. history.